is the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to go ahead and preface this one by saying we will probably not touch on some of these guys a ton just because they have a huge class and some really interesting guys at the top here. So they do what Schneider said he would never do,
Yeah,
and what
it's
we'll
very
give
true.
Sam Monson at Check the Mic credit for because
He
he
deserves
wanted this
credit,
pick
man.
so bad. They take Gray Zabel, will tackle, but they'll play him at guard out of North Dakota State, 18th overall.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just talking about the check the mic guys, Steve's told Sam they'll never do it, man. They will never do it because, like you said, the GM said they would never do it, and they did it, man. And honestly, I totally get it because their interior of their offensive line was so bad, and it's also you have to take into account that they just signed Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold, when his interior of his offensive line was bad, he basically folded. I mean, like whenever like the offensive line play was bad for the Jets or even the Vikings at points last year, Darnold's play just got much worse. So it totally makes sense that after signing a guy like Darnold, you want to beef up the interior of that offensive line with Gray Zabel. And he was one of the best guards in the class, man. I mean, you could argue that his profile was cleaner than Tyler Booker, and Tyler Booker was taken,
Good.
6 spots ahead of him. So I thought it was solid value compared to how the rest of the league was attacking offensive line in the draft. And also, I mean, literally the biggest position of need for the Seahawks.
Yeah, I agree completely. Dude is huge to be bumped. He played tackle primarily at North Dakota State, but then when he went to the Senior Bowl, he bumped inside and basically just shifted every snap between center, left guard, and right guard, and dominated at each one. So the questions, people who are like, "Oh, we just drafted a guard from North Dakota State," the guy proved it at the Senior Bowl that he can hold up against the best of the best and looked elite doing it. So, production score wise from the next gen stat stuff, he's number one from a production perspective and number three from athleticism. So, to your point, cleaner profile than Tyler Booker. I think one of the only things that probably knocks him is just being at North Dakota State. But
Yep.
I absolutely love the pick. They needed to address their offensive line. And to your point, the last time we saw Sam Darnold after having an MVP caliber season, in all seriousness, it was him getting torn apart by the Rams defensive line we just talked about.
Yep.
They absolutely wrecked him. So you've got to protect him for Sam Darnold to not be seeing ghosts out there again and to get the Vikings version of him. So love the pick of Gray Zabel there at 18th overall.
Yeah, I agree, man, with everything you said because you have to take into account what your quarterback strengths are, and they've neglected this position for so long, and it's honestly kind of backfired on them in many ways. So just shoring it up by getting a guy that's likely going to become just a solid NFL starter. I like it, man.
Love it. And then in the second round, they traded up. So they actually traded up to take who, in my opinion, is just a Seahawk. Like, you look at this dude and you're like, that is a Seahawk. And they take Nick Emenwari, South Carolina safety, who earned a ton of hype leading up to the draft after running a 4.38 40. Dude, 6'3", 220 doing that. He just looks like a Legion of Boom guy.
Dude is a freak, man. Dude is a freak. It totally makes sense why they would go after this guy, considering their history and everything. And is a guy that's honestly solid value for where they picked him as well. I mean, people had this guy going at the end of the first round in many mocks. Like I had him going to the Ravens a few times in a couple mocks I did at the end of the first round. So getting him in the second round, I thought was really solid value. And like you said, man, he just looks like a Legion of Boom kind of player. Shout out to the old Legion of Boom. But so, yeah, I thought that was really good value in the second.
Yeah, super insane athlete, 43-inch vertical. And, for Mike McDonald, I think he can kind of become Kyle Hamilton-esque, right? When he was with Baltimore as their defense coordinator, another tall safety that's super athletic. You can play him near the line of scrimmage. You can drop him back and let him do a true free. So much you can do with him, and fascinated to see what McDonald does with him in that defense for Seattle. They double up in the second. They had 2 second-round picks from the DK Metcalf trade, and they use one of the others on Elijah Aroro, tight end out of Miami, another position that, another team like the Rams that was mocked the tight end pretty often, and they take one who was kind of definitively like the most athletic tight end in this class.
Yeah, and tight end's an interesting position because your college production doesn't matter as much as tight end as a tight end. Usually the bigger athletic guys end up being more successful in the league. So that's a position where I understand taking a less productive guy and a more athletic player. In the second round, is it a little bit of a reach? I would say yes, but again, it makes sense to take that big athletic tight end in round two, and could again come in and play for the Seahawks at some point. Right now, of course, behind Noah Fant. He's listed behind AJ Barner on the depth chart in our lads. I don't think that'll hold up. I think Aurora will take his spot pretty quickly. But again, I like taking a chance on that. Load Darnold up with weapons, man. That's a guy that is one of the more fascinating storylines going into next year is Sam Darnold, and like, can he continue what he did last year? But either way, he showed last year that you need to load him up with weapons, dude. He's a guy that needs to have as much offensive talent around him as possible. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because honestly, I was just looking, and Noah Fant is honestly younger than I thought he was. Still, he's only 27. He'll turn 28 this season. But guys, the first round pick, hasn't been fantastic at any point. So it at least makes sense to attack that position. And with Darnold coming from Minnesota, to your point, where you had the best receiver in the NFL, one of the best number twos in Jordan Addison, and one of the best tight ends in T.J. Hawkinson. I think there's a combination of the skill set around him and Kevin O'Connell's just QB whispering that makes the fit for him in Seattle very interesting, and with a very different, weapons around him, because you got rid of kind of the best one that was there for him.
Yeah.
And DK, you immediately trade him away.
They did.
They get Cooper Kupp.
But
yeah. But they did immediately trade away their best receiver. So
it's gonna be interesting, dude. That, like I said, it's one of the more fascinating storylines because this is a good roster, but Darnold has question marks, man, and I think it's not the best receiving core in the world. But Jackson Smith-Njigba has started to develop and has become a really good player.
yes, he can be the number one now.
And Cooper Kupp has something left. He's not completely old and washed up. And as we'll talk about in the draft, they also continue to attack receiver in the draft as well. So I think they're so far in the offseason doing right by Darnold.
Yeah, I think so. And we'll see how it all plays out with these extra pieces that they add with Elijah Roro. I was also just comparing, which was just blowing my mind a little bit, that Noah Fant is 4 years younger than Cooper Kupp, which is just interesting.
Wow. Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. That was blowing my mind a little bit. So now when talking quarterback position, this is where one of the more interesting picks happened. Third round pick 92. They take quarterback Jalen Milroe out of Alabama.
Yep, Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. It's fascinating because our Tennessee Vols honestly maybe single-handedly dropped his draft stock because he had his worst game in his college career against the Vols. But a guy who is extremely athletic, is an elite runner. He can bring something to the Seattle offense right now. He's not going to start at quarterback, but as far as designed run plays, goal line carries, things of that nature, Jalen Milroe can make an impact immediately for the Seahawks. He also has one of the best arms in the class, dude. Outside of Cam Ward, he might have had the second best arm talent in the entire draft class. So a guy that is interesting because he has the tools and was inconsistent as far as passing is concerned at the college level. But taking a guy like that in the third round makes so much more sense than in the first round, man. Taking a guy who has the tools, has the upside, is extremely athletic, can run in the third round just makes more sense to me than taking a chance on that in the first round. Because I mean, Jalen Milroe was invited to the draft, man. There was rumbling saying, okay, he could potentially go to the Seahawks in the first round or go to the Steelers in the first round because he has all those tools. But instead, you get that guy to sit behind Darnold in the third round, which I just think that makes so much more sense for Milroe and his development.
I agree with that completely. I He's an interesting prospect because of how much you're leaning on his athleticism and needing him to grow as a passer, which we know really well historically. Guys, the outliers that have happened recently have caused the evaluation on the quarterback position to change pretty drastically. I think where people started taking shots more because Josh Allen and Lamar were completely anomalies when it comes to a guy who somebody who has athleticism or have the physical traits, and then they develop the accuracy and all that later on. Everybody wants to have the next Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson now, and it's just not likely. But if you draft them and let them sit and have the ability to develop, then there's way more opportunity there. He, crazily enough, for the next gen thing, he actually graded at a 99 on athleticism score. He's quite literally like the peak of athleticism at the quarterback position. And what's just very interesting is that his, comp by Lance Zierlein was Cordell Stewart, which is funny because of the conversation that happened with the Check the Mic guys where Lance Zierlein, this is probably why he asked, but was basically like, with a guy like Jalen Miller, you touched on the packages for him. How many years do you give a guy like that? And this is an off-season topic, but how many years do you give a guy like that before you try them at another position? How much time do you try to develop him at quarterback before you say your athleticism can't be wasted anymore and we're going to throw you in at wide receiver or something?
It is very I also think he could play running back, man. He has such good running skills that he could play running back. Now, obviously, you want to give him a shot at quarterback because the arm talent's there, man. It's really just about consistent accuracy and decision making that is Milroe's problem. Also, he's also one of those guys that gets himself in trouble as far as taking sacks because he is so athletic that he thinks he can get away from every sack, but he just can't do that, as we saw in Neyland, I will say. But this past season, but
safety in there,
yeah, exactly. But anyway, but I mean, again, that is an interesting topic though, because he is such a special runner, dude. And that's why I'm saying that he can make a difference on this football team right now, which makes him even more fascinating than all these other developmental quarterbacks that really aren't going to make an impact on the team immediately. Like they're going to sit behind a starter and try to develop their skills and eventually become a starter. But Miro is a fascinating case where he's also in that bucket, but he also can help the Seahawks win this next season. Going to be interested to see how they tap into that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fascinating. I'm excited to see it. And one thing too that's really important with him as well is the character side.
Yes.
He's one of those guys that, unlike Shador, was one of the ones that everybody raved about. Like he had that story that's really cool where they were like, what are you working on, or what are your flaws? And he's like, how much time do you have? And then they were like, how do you not feel worried about telling us all this? And then he basically said, if somebody comes in here and doesn't tell you they have a lot of things they need to work on, they're lying to you and they're insulting you because that means they think you didn't watch the tape enough. And like that type of self-awareness exactly is crazy to have. And also means he's coachable. Like he is basically saying, I know I need help and I'm a bit of a project. So let's get there together. Like I'm willing to be that piece you can mold.
It's also his story is also interesting as well. That I love that story that you just told about the interview. But he also stayed at Alabama when Nick Saban left. Man, I mean, a lot of guys jump ship, and honestly, a lot of guys jump ship, and it helped their career. So that's a fascinating part of it. He was loyal enough to stay at Alabama and stay there despite Saban leaving and everything like that. So again, it just speaks to Milroe's character, and he is a great guy, man, and. It's, even though he played for Alabama, it's a guy now that he's on the next level, I'll definitely be rooting for and interested to see how his development works out and how the Seahawks use him next season.
Absolutely. And I want to point out something, bringing up the coaching change. I think his 2023 season statistically and everything was better.
Yeah.
Like he was better. And then the scheme changes, the new coach comes in and it's like he took a step back. So it's like, how much do you even blame that on him versus the scheme change? So something to think about, and I'm sure a lot of teams evaluated that, but basically getting him back to that 2023 version is what you would want to do. But yeah, I agree. We'll be rooting for him and curious to see how it kind of plays out for him for his career in the NFL. All right. Now tackling some of these other guys, Riley Mills, defensive tackle at Notre Dame, pretty productive and athletic guy, had 7.5 sacks last season. So adding some more depth along that defensive line that could use a little bit of help as well. Then they go an interesting pick, Torrey Horton, wide receiver out of Colorado State. Pretty solid value pick there. Pretty athletic receiver, 6'2", 196, ran a 4.41. So adding him there to continue to add some pieces to that offense that just lost DK Metcalf.
Yeah, love the Torrey Horton pick. Adding depth at wide receiver, like you said, really productive and solid athlete. Again, I think he's going to play, man. And 5th-round pick, getting him offensive snaps that's really good for the 5th round. So love them drafting him. I thought that was one of their better picks.
Yeah, and then they go double up at tight end, take Robbie Oots out of Alabama. He's basically a blocking tight end. He had very minimal passing snaps, and he's really, but funny enough, he has no production, but he's actually pretty a decent athlete. So basically just a versatile, blocker for them. And then they take developmental guard Bryce Cavalou out of Kansas in the 6th round. And then one of the best value picks I think we'd agree on in the entire draft, Damian Martinez, running back out of Miami in the 7th round, pick 223.
I love the Damian Martinez pick, man. It's, another example of why you don't invest a lot in the running back position, because I think they got a starting caliber running back potentially on the next level in the 7th round. A guy that I saw consistently mocked in the 4th, 5th round on a consistent basis. So fascinating that he fell all the way to the 7th. Productive college player, and I think obviously they're set at their starter with Kenneth Walker, but I think Damian Martinez will find himself in that rotation at some point.
Another one of those guys, 3 years somewhere, was at Oregon State, transferred to Miami. He's 6'2", 232, due to kind of a bowling ball, and PFF Bigs board we've referenced, he was 80th on it, and goes at 223, which is kind of crazy. And with a running back depth chart that Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are on, they haven't been the most reliable from a health perspective. So I would be shocked if Martinez didn't find his way into a good amount of carries in his rookie season, one way or another. And then they wrap their class up with a couple more offensive players, Mason Rickman, tackle at Iowa, and then Ricky White, the 3rd wide receiver out of UNLV. Solid guy, one of those other guys that didn't test well, kind of in that Tez Johnson world where didn't test well for their size, but was a very productive receiver, not at the Power 5 level, but at the level he was at. He started at Michigan State, transferred out, but was really productive at UNLV the couple years he was starting there. And was also special teams player of the year.
Oh,
worth noting. So could be that at the very least. Yeah.
Yeah, probably going to be a special teams guy.
And their UDFAs, I don't think anybody. They signed a bunch of edge guys. Oh, one does stand out, Jared Ivey. The other edge rusher out of Ole Miss, a guy that I think a lot of people are surprised went undrafted.
I am very surprised Jared Ivey went undrafted. That could be an extremely impactful UDFA.
Absolutely. Yeah. What was your favorite pick for the Seattle Seahawks?
I'm gonna go Damian Martinez in the 7th round, man.
All right.
There's not better value than that, I feel like, in this draft. So loved that pick for them.
Thought you were gonna go Milroe. Thought you were gonna go QB.
I thought about Milroe, but as a Vols fan, it's pretty tough to go an Alabama player, brother.
Bias getting in the way.
It is.
I'm going to go, even though they trade, man, I don't know. I love the Gray Zabel fit and pick. I'm going to honorary mention that, but I just love the value in the fit too for Nick Emmanwori in the 2nd round. Traded up for him, but they had so many draft picks and still had another 2nd that it didn't matter. And he fits. Can't wait to see what Mike McDonald does with him. But shout out Gray Zabel because Schneider did it, and I think it was a good pick. And I think he's going to immediately be an impact player for the Seahawks. So. All right, what does the consensus say about the Seahawks?
3rd overall in the entire NFL.
Wow.
Pretty surprising, but I don't necessarily disagree with it, man. I think they got a lot of guys. They drafted in volume for one, and they got a lot of good value as far as the consensus is concerned. And I think everybody's also looking at the Milroe pick and saying how that's pretty intriguing, man. Especially considering I don't know, out of this class of quarterbacks that has so many question marks, you take a guy like Tyler Shuck at 40th overall and Jackson Dart, who aren't crazy, weren't very much more productive than Milroe. But Milroe can make an impact right now. I don't know. I think people are looking at this draft and are intrigued by it, and they got a lot of good value. So I like it.
I agree with that. They hit on a lot of guys with good value and fitting some needs they had and gaps and depth. And then, yeah, I completely agree on the Milrow front that from a process perspective with the quarterback position, I like that more than what other teams did. So,
yeah, exactly.
yep. So that is the Seahawks 2025 class, and that